Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. We are in the book of 2 Kings chapter 14. Let's start in verse 1. In the second year of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Jehoaddan, and she was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. In everything he followed the example of his father Joash. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. So, Joash is assassinated, and his son becomes king. And he's 22 years old when or 25 years old when he becomes king. His dad was 22 when he was born. So his dad, even though he started on the throne as a 7-year-old, he had children for that day and time, fairly decently late time. It's a good age to be having children and raising them. There's no indication that there was older sons that didn't survive, but there may have been. There's all kinds of things. But Amaziah, I don't know why I'm having problems pronouncing his name. It's not that hard. Amaziah became king after his father was assassinated. And he lives to a reasonable age. We'll get to that when we get to the end of his reign, what happened. His mother had a Hebrew name, and she was from Jerusalem. So his dad married somebody that he was supposed to have married as queen and had children by her. So Joash does the right things. We know from last week that he, as long as the high priest that had put him on the throne was alive, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and after that he began to fall away. So when it says that his son followed his dad's example, I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit here. Early in his reign, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but he didn't have the people doing right. And then later in his reign, he started to do evil things. So he followed his dad's example. He was not a great king. He wasn't a bad king. Verse 5. After the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed the officials who had murdered his father the king. Yet he did not put the sons of the assassins to death in accordance with what was written in the book of the law of Moses, where the Lord commanded, "Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sins." So he's obeying Scripture here, and he's following what he should be doing politically. He's killing the people that killed his father. They assassinated his father. They should not have. He executes them, but he doesn't touch the rest of the family. That is in contrast with what Israel does. When they get a new dynasty, like Jehu wiped out Ahab's family. Omri, the previous king, started the previous dynasty, Ahab's father. When he destroyed the family of the prior king. Now, the prior king had been king a whole 7 days before he killed him. But that king in 7 days had wiped out the family of the prior dynasty. So, that's the pattern that you see in the northern kingdom. That's the pattern you see in the surrounding kingdoms. And here he is not doing that. And that is special. And the people note that he is obeying the law. And it's going to make them want to obey the law and not take it into their own hands. And it's not about power, but it's what's right and wrong. And this gives him a boost early in his career, that he's a godly king. And like his father Joash, early in his career, he was a godly king and followed the law, and he got a strengthening to his rule because of that. It was a time of political instability in Judah, and we'll get to that more later, but he does what's right early in his rule, and it benefits him. Verse 7. He was the one who defeated 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and captured Selah in battle, calling it Joktheel, the name it has to this day. So he ends up attacking an Edomite city and capturing it and putting it and making it part of Judah, and he changes the name, and it's part of Judah till the writing when they wrote it down. It still had the Hebrew name that was given then. He won a decisive battle that was of benefit to the country. Verse 8. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, with the challenge, "Come meet me face to face." So he challenges the northern kingdom of Israel to go to war. That's not a smart move. He's attacking a country roughly 3 times his size and geographical area. They have some better agricultural lands. They can support more people, a larger army. And while they have longer supply lines, they have a larger army. It's not a good situation. Just because you beat the Edomites, it doesn't mean that you have a greater army. The Edomites are a small country. They're less than a third the size of Judah. They're a tiny country. And you defeated them. Good. You killed 10,000 of them in battle. That may have been a major part of their army, but it's not all that many soldiers in that day and time. 250,000 to 500,000 men in an army was a typical army in that day. Some of the larger armies fielded 1 million to 1.5 million men. So, wiping out 10,000 of them and capturing a city, so what? You haven't done a whole lot. Verse 9. But Jehoash, king of Israel, replied to Amaziah, king of Judah, "A thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a cedar in Lebanon, 'Give your daughter to my son in marriage.' Then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle underfoot. You have indeed defeated Edom, and now you are arrogant. Glory in your victory, but stay at home. Why ask for trouble and cause your own downfall and that of Judah also?" So he uses a metaphor story that, a thistle was not a long-lasting plant. It's easy to trample. It wasn't a permanent thing. The cedars of Lebanon were known for being particularly enduring trees. And so he's comparing the king of Judah and Judah to a thistle, and saying, hey, just because you won that little battle against a little bitty country doesn't mean you can come up against one of the major powers in the surrounding area and do any good. Stay at home, enjoy your victory, enjoy the fact that God gave you a victory, and, don't be arrogant thinking you can defeat somebody bigger than you with a better army, more organized. He's basically saying, we don't have any reason to go to war. We're distant relatives, and there's no point in this war. It's not going to do anybody any good. He probably was looking at Aram and Assyria to his east and northeast and going, I got some bigger guys up there. I really don't need to be messing with the small guys. Looking further afield, the Egyptians were beginning to grow in power. He didn't need the guy between him and Egypt being weakened by him. He's like, you can stay a buffer zone down there, and you play your cards right. We can be allies if any of these bigger empires start coming our direction. We can stand back to back and defend each other. Don't come to war with me. Enjoy your little victory over your little enemy and be done. Verse 11. Amaziah, however, would not listen, so Jehoash, king of Israel, attacked. He and Amaziah, king of Judah, faced each other at Beth Shemesh in Judah. Judah was routed by Israel, and every man fled to his home. Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, at Beth Shemesh. Then Jehoash went to Jerusalem and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, a section about 600 feet long. He took all the gold and silver and all the articles found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. He also took hostages and returned to Samaria. So just as he predicted, this battle did not go well for Judah. And he won, and he captured the king, and the army fled and all went back home. And he takes his army and his retribution, goes to Jerusalem, and takes down a significant portion of the wall. Now, 600 feet is probably, not percentage-wise a big part of the wall, but it's enough that it would be very hard to rebuild and make it strong, particularly after you've been defeated like that. And it's big enough you can put a massive army through there. It leaves Jerusalem vulnerable. Even if the people decide we're just going to take the debris from the wall being torn down and hastily throw up an embankment, it's not a stout city wall anymore. It takes a lot of organized effort to build a city wall that's sound and robust. And he's not going to have the political leverage to do so. At this point, he's a compromised king. For one thing, he's a captive in the other country. So the people in Judah don't really want to follow him. They see him as a foolish leader that led them into disaster when he didn't have to. And they knew that the other king said, hey, don't do this. It's foolish. And he did it anyway. So they don't want to follow him to repair the damage. They want to get back to farming and everything that's day-to-day life. They don't want to suddenly put in a bunch of effort to repair what you were so stupid to get torn up. And so Amaziah is in a terrible position now because he did it. Verse 17. Amaziah, king of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. As for the other events of Amaziah's reign, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? So, the king that defeated him dies soon after he wins that battle. And Amaziah lives 15 more years after that point. We're going to come back to that in a minute because it's an important date in things. But he reigns for 15 years as a defeated monarch, as a vassal in a vassal state. They are beholden to the northern kingdom, Israel. They're the vassal of the northern kingdom. And this is, by the way, the same king that Elisha deals with and tells, shoot an arrow and strike the ground. And so we're talking, he's nominally following God. Now, he's not really following him real well, because we dealt with him last week, and he didn't obey Elisha very well, and he still worshipped at the golden bulls and all that. So he's not worshiping Yahweh correctly. But he is attempting. He's not worshiping at the Baals. He's not worshiping at the other gods in the surrounding countries. And at least politically, he's pretending to worship Yahweh. And so the people are putting their faith in Yahweh. And they're seeing what the prophets have done, and they're teaching their children, and they're teaching them the history. And so the people themselves are worshiping Yahweh. Not real well, but they're doing it by the way that they do it. Verse 19. They conspired against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish and killed him there. He was brought back by horse and was buried in Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. So he reigned for 15 years as a vassal king, and things got politically worse. And so the second king in a row gets assassinated in Judah. It's a time of political disaster in the southern kingdom. And both kings, early in their career, were faithful to God, obeyed God, it went well. Later in their career, they quit obeying God, and it became disastrous. And the people rebelled and killed them. And then after they were killed, they were brought back and buried. So this tells you about the political situation in Judah. It's not a good situation. The kingdom is not united. It has fractures throughout it. We don't know what all those fractures were, but we know it was a broken, unfit country because the kings did not obey God. Verse 21. Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah, He was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah after Amaziah rested with his fathers. So he was 16 years old when he became king. He had already, as a 16-year-old, gone out and captured Elath and rebuilt it and restored it to Judah. It should have been a Judean city. It was not. And he captured it and rebuilt it. And so he had that reputation as a prince of rebuilding cities. And he had captured it and restored it back to Judah like it should have been. And he built it up as a city. So at 16, he's already known for being a good leader. He's 16 years old, 15 years after the king that destroyed the wall of Jerusalem died. So he was a 1-year-old when the king that defeated his dad died, which was soon after Judah was defeated. So he has the reputation with the people of Judah to do the job right. Now, he was 16 years old when he started to reign. His dad had ruled for, was 25, and he reigned for 29 years. So he was 54 when he died. So his dad was, 38 when he was conceived, when he was born. So he was born fairly late in his dad's life. That's why he's such a young king. But the people have confidence that he will be a good king, because even at 16 he's already led men into battle, captured a city, and led people to rebuild that city. So he's a builder king. And let's face it, they have a section of wall missing out of the capital city. They need a builder king. So I understand why they chose him, because he's already done this before his dad is assassinated. So he's the ideal choice. And they probably picked that time to assassinate Dad because they saw the son was ready to rule. Awfully young. I mean, most 16 years old aren't fit to lead, aren't fit to rule. On the other hand, Dad's not fit to rule, and he's already proven that he can do the job. And he's already doing what kings should do. What a statement about his dad. A 16-year-old's better than a 54-year-old to rule. Ouch. Verse 23. In the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria, and he reigned 51 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. So, it tells you something about Jehoash. He names his son Jeroboam, apparently in honor of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, the first king of Israel, the one that Scripture keeps saying, and he caused Israel to sin. Jeroboam is no different than Jeroboam. This is sometimes referred to as Jeroboam II. He's not in the lineage of Jeroboam son of Nebat. Nobody's survived from that household. And but he's politically a good king for Israel. He reigns 54 years. He reigns a long time. We don't know how old he was when he became king, but he wasn't all that old if he was going to live 54 more years as king. 51 more years, or 41 more years as king. So, he's a healthy man, too. Verse 25, he was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Sea of Arabah in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath Hepher. Now, that's a name you should know. Yes, this is the same Jonah that wrote the book about prophesying about the destruction of Nineveh, and he didn't want to go prophesy in Nineveh. He wanted to not warn them and let God destroy it, because Nineveh was the arch nemesis of Israel. They were the local regional power. They were going to be a problem, and they were growing in strength, and he wanted to see God destroy them. So he didn't want to run there. And so he got in a boat and went somewhere else, and God caused the storm, and they pitched him over, and a great fish swallowed him. And, after 3 days in the belly of the fish, he finally gets humble, and the fish spits him up on the bank, and he goes into Nineveh and preaches, and they repent. And then he's mad at God because they repented. Like you can make God change his mind. But his preaching was effective. Yes, this is the same Jonah. So we have here that he had somewhere in his career, either before or after the story we have of him going to Nineveh, foretold that Jeroboam, the king of Israel, would restore Israel to its former boundaries, and from the northern end all the way to basically the Salt Sea, the Dead Sea. And so he restores what was on the west side, the east side of the Jordan, to Israel. He takes it away from Aram, and his father had won a couple of battles and restored it so that they could function as a country. But God had them regain their boundaries under Jeroboam. Now, part of what's going on geopolitically is Aram has been the local strong power, and Assyria has been off to the north of them and is gaining in strength. Assyria is beginning to attack Aram and weaken Aram, and so they're weakened, and so when Israel attacks, Israel wins, because Aram now has a much bigger enemy attacking them. And is it worth defending territory that you've not historically had, and it's only been a generation you've held or so, and or should you stay in your strongholds and face and defeat that enemy that's coming up on you? Well, Aram decides it's not worth the effort and basically abandons the territory they'd captured from Israel a generation before and stayed in their home territory. However, that defeat and that loss of the better agricultural lands also harms Aram, and so they can't defend themselves against the ascendant Assyrians. And so the Assyrians are beginning to be on the march, and they are in the process of a multi-generation empire building, and the defeat of Aram will then put Israel in the crosshairs. So we're getting to that point where the whole landscape is fixing to change. And God is fixing to punish Israel. They have not fully embraced Him. They've not gone back to temple worship and only worshiping at the altar in Jerusalem, at the temple in Jerusalem. They're still worshiping at their false idols that they're calling Yahweh. They're still putting people into the priesthood that aren't from Aaron, or aren't even from Levi. They're still committing all the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat did. And Jeroboam the second son of Amaziah is doing that. I mean, not Amaziah, Jehoash is doing that. And yes, he's able to restore the boundaries to Israel. He's able to make it a politically sound country, a defensible country again. The people were seriously hurting, and God was restoring to them what they needed, because He was merciful and gracious to them. They weren't worshiping God correctly, but God also needed them. He wasn't willing to punish them yet. We're going to find out in the next couple of chapters how things begin to deteriorate, and then God uses that deterioration to wipe them out. Verse 26, the Lord had seen how bitterly everyone in Israel, whether slave or free, was suffering. There was no one to help them. And since the Lord had not said He would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, He saved them by the hand of Jeroboam son of Jehoash. So, God hasn't yet declared that He's going to destroy Israel. That comes later. They have responded to these two great prophets, and the people have responded. The kings have not responded correctly. Even the ones that were appointed by Elijah and Elisha, and should have used that as an excuse to worship Yahweh, but didn't. But God uses Jeroboam to save them and restore the kingdom and set things right. Verse 28, as for the other events of Jeroboam's reign, all he did in his military achievements, including how he recovered for Israel both Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Yadi, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jeroboam rested with his fathers, the kings of Israel, and Zechariah, his son, succeeded him as king. Now, he recovers Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Yadi. Who is Yadi? This is the first time we've heard about this country, right? Yadi is an alternate pronunciation of Judah. The Israelites had become under the influence of Aram. They had adopted a lot of the language of Aram, which was Armenian, which, by the way, was common in what becomes Babylon. And the Babylonian captives end up speaking Armenian. And so when they come back, they don't speak Hebrew anymore. And we've seen in the names of people, Hebrew tended, when we translate those names from Hebrew into English, we translate the beginning letter as a Y. When we translate Armenian, we are words that had an Armenian influence, we tend to translate as a J. So we see that they have had for several generations, and they're naming their kids Armenian names, not Hebrew names. Judah, in the process, has changed the name, and as a response to this Armenian influence, this Armenian language influence, gone hyper Hebrew. And they change a name that rightfully should have been a J to a Y. And start the pronunciation shifting to a more Hebrew type name. And that's what Yadi is. It's Judah pronounced like Judah was a Armenian influence in Hebrew, instead of Judah being his rightful Hebrew name. And so Jeroboam not only wins against Aram, he's winning against Judah and taking cities that weren't rightfully Judah's away from them and putting them as part of his kingdom. And Damascus should have been Syria, but at this point, Syria is gone. Aram has defeated them. Israel has defeated them. Judah has defeated them. They were the local baddie for a little while, and they have been defeated and they've been destroyed. And those three countries have basically divided up the land, and Judah ended up with a capital city. The other two countries ended up with other pieces. And so Jeroboam takes the capital city away from Judah. Judah would have had the history that they should have rightly been ruling Syria, because King David, the first king in their line, defeated Syria and made Damascus and Syria a vassal state. So they have the history that they should be the ones in charge of Syria. At least that's how they'll tell it. So when Syria gets wiped off the map, they are interested in Damascus, the city. But it's not a very tenable position to hold. Militarily, it's so far away from Judah. It travels, well, to get there, there's no good defensible routes, particularly with Aram and Israel controlling other parts of Syria. And so it's easy for Israel, as they become ascendant and defeat Aram, to go take that from Judah. Hamath was also a Syrian city. It was further south, closer to Judah, but it was much closer to Israel. So it made sense for it to be part of Israel's territory, not Judah's. And so they're basically making the empire lines more reasonable, more rounder countries, not what we'd call gerrymandered country lines. And so it's understandable. Thing is, it wasn't ever Israelite territory to start with. Not since King Solomon. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, when he lost the northern country, Syria split off to be its own country. In fact, that's one. Well, King Solomon actually lost it toward the end of his rule. That's one of the people that kings that gave him problems. Is a king became decided to take control of Syria and became king there, and he gave Solomon trouble. So Rehoboam had no ability to take it back. If you can't even keep your own country, you're not going to defeat somebody else's. And so since that time, it's never been part of Judah. It's not been part of Israel. It's only because of geopolitics that anybody has any ability to control it. That's not Syria. And so in that vacuum state, before Assyria becomes ascendant and wipes everybody out, Israel controls it for a little while. Well, Judah controls piece of it for a while, but then Israel takes it from them. So Jeroboam's big achievement is that he gets Israel back to its original boundaries, a little bit past it, and has a buffer around him to protect the Israelites. That's his big achievement. Holy Father, you are the director of kingdoms. You are the director of nations. You direct kings in their paths. You sometimes use unworthy people like Jeroboam II to achieve your goals. Lord, on paper, he doesn't look like a good king, but you used him to set up events so that your people would understand your will, and that we could look back at it in the long term and realize what we should have done. And Lord, I ask that you give us wisdom to know right now what we should do. Lord, I ask that you influence our election cycle that's going on right now, that wise and godly people will become our rulers, that they will intentionally look to what you would like us to do and lead righteously. Lord, I ask that you give us the best leadership we can, that would be humble before you and not arrogant. In your holy name, amen. I am your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor of Family and Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church, and this has been the Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. This was recorded on Sunday, August 25th, 2024, and Oscar had a good sermon this morning. He's beginning a new series on the genealogy of Jesus, and I like what he said, where he's going. I enjoy where he's going with this. He's got a good sermon series here. You want to go see it. You want to come in person. I hope to see you there Wednesday night so we can discuss the political weakness that is inhabiting Judah now. And then I hope to see you next week at worship. You have a blessed week.